So if Madeleine died on the 29th of April 2007, why was her death covered up? And why were so many people involved in the McCann case? So many powerful people. Her death may have been the result of the use of an overdose of sedatives or other drugs. It may have been a freak accident. It may have been an unprovoked assault. Richard's film, Why the Cover-Up, the last film, discusses the evidence that the children might have been sedated. And this is even discussed in Kate McCann's book. She actually talks about sedation, that she was, I don't think I said this, she was an anaesthetist. So she knew about sedation, that was her job. Whatever the cause of death, it was clearly important that the details of it would not be revealed, and perhaps the autopsy of the body would have revealed one or more things that would have incriminated the McCanns themselves or other people connected to them. So they needed to get away from the idea that Madeleine had died. Indeed, Kate McCann requested of the Portuguese police that the children be checked for drugs, as she had implied the abductor might have used sedatives on the children before the abduction. And Jerry McCann actually cancelled this request. It's another not very well-known fact. And there's been allegations of paedophile involvement. It was Jerry McCann himself who first mentioned the idea that Madeleine could have been taken by a paedophile, and this was also reported in the UK press. Paedophile abducted Madeleine, police say, which was reported on the 6th of May. Sunday People said that Maddie is alive, but in sicko hands, but the police refused to hand out his picture. Kidnapped toddler Madeleine McCann was believed to be alive last night, but in the clutches of a child sex pervert. So that angle was actually put out early on by the British media. So again, Richard in his films investigates this chap called Ray Wire. He was often called upon by the media to provide expert opinion in relation to the possibility of paedophile abduction. On the May the 7th, 2007, Dominic Kennedy of The Times wrote, "If Madeleine McCann was abducted by a paedophile, there is a chance that she is still alive and can be saved by sensitive policing, according to Ray Wire, a sexual crimes consultant. Portugal is known to attract British paedophiles. A ring of 20 Britons set up there around 1990, filming sex acts with local boys and sending tapes to Belgium and the Netherlands. Some were later jailed in England. The case helped to persuade the British government to make it illegal for Britons to have sex with underage children abroad." So Wire said that he spent time with McCanns, and he said, "There was no sign of any such deceit. It is absolutely impossible for them to have been involved," he said. For 3 days, all they could see in their minds was Madeleine lying dead. They were in complete agreement she'd been taken by a predator, abused and killed. They were certain they would never see her alive again. The image of her lying murdered hardly left them, and they expected at any time to receive the news that her body had been found. Wire was not all he seemed to be. If you look at Richard's films again, there's a lot of evidence. He spread stories about rumours of satanic ritual abuse in relation to various cases of paedophile activity in the UK. Wire's name also appears on the Elm Guesthouse list. If people don't know what that is, you can look up about the Elm Guesthouse. It's a notorious London address which was used, alleged to have been used for paedophile rings and paedophiles actually circulating in the higher realms of government and so forth. And more details on that in Richard's film. And again, you can find out about this guy. He's dead now, this Ray Wire guy. Also, Clement Freud. A letter from him is reproduced in Kate McCann's book. "Dear McCanns, I have a house in Peter L. Been ashamed of the intrusion into your lives by the media, and if you would care to come to lunch, dinner at any time before Wednesday next, do ring and let me know. I cook decent meals. Sincerely, Clement Freud." That's in Kate McCann's book. In case you didn't know, 15th of June 2016, Sir Clement Freud, the former broadcaster and politician, was exposed on Tuesday night as a paedophile who sexually abused girls as young as 10 for decades. Freud, who died in 2009, so again this story comes out 7 years after his death, spent years abusing a girl who he brought up as a daughter and violently raped a teenager while he was an MP. His widow, Lady Freud, has apologised to his victims, saying she is shocked, deeply saddened and profoundly sorry for what happened to her husband, 58 years, did to them. Again, a lot of detail in Richard's films about CEOP, which is the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. And he looks at the role of these two guys on the screen here, Jim Gamble on the top and Mark Williams Thomas, in handling the sort of paedophile allegations and sort of massaging those in the media. Mark Williams Thomas changed his story about what his relationship to the McCanns was. He claimed at first that he basically, both these figures have serious questions about what they were doing in relation to the McCann case and how they may have influenced the investigation with their comments in the media. They made various comments about paedophiles and so forth. Again, that's covered in considerable depth in Richard's film. So they had to manage this angle. Now, this is an important piece of evidence which has not really been covered in the media. The statement of Catherine Gasper and Savio Gasper in September, and this was given to Leicestershire Police on the 16th of May 2007. In September 2005, me and A, name of first child, who was around 1 year and a half old, holidayed in Mallorca with Kate, Jerry and Madeleine, who was about 2.5 years old at the time, and the twins, Sean and Emily, who were only a few months old. I was pregnant with B, the name of the second child, and there were also other friends of Kate and Jerry with us there. There was also a couple, Dave and Fiona the Paynes, I think. I believe they were married and had a daughter around 1 year old called Lily. I remember Fiona was pregnant on that holiday. Probably around the 4th or 5th day there was an incident that stuck in my mind. I say this because I have thought about that particular incident I am about to describe many times since then. I was sitting between Jerry and Dave, and I think they were both talking about Madeleine. I can't remember the conversation in its entirety, but they seemed to be discussing a particular scenario. I remember Dave saying to Jerry something about she, meaning Madeleine, would do this. While he mentioned the word this, Dave was doing the action of sucking one of his fingers and pushing it in and out of his mouth, while his other hand was doing a circle around his nipple with a circular movement around his clothes. This was done in a provocative way. There seemed to be an explicit insinuation about what he was saying and doing. I remember being shocked by that. I always felt it was something very weird and that it was not something anyone should say or do. I looked at Jerry and also at Dave to gauge their reactions. I looked around as if saying, did someone else hear that, or was it just me? The conversation stopped for a moment, then we all began conversing again. Moreover, I remember Dave doing the same thing on another occasion. This statement was sent to Portuguese police only in mid-October 2007. In other words, it was sent to Leicestershire Police on the 16th of May by the Gaspers and only sent to the Portuguese police after Amaral had been taken off the case. I've got another film clip here, which is I'm going to want to try and play this.
Now, I want to come on to another video about Madeleine McCann. This was produced by Madeleine's godfather, Liverpudlian filmmaker John Corner, who plays a role in events after the 3rd of May 2007. In August 2007, he spent a week in the McCann's villa filming a video which he then leaked to a BBC Panorama team who made a documentary in 2007 making use of Corner's footage. On the 1st of May 2010, just ahead of the 3rd anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, Corner released a 2.5-minute video which caused a storm of protest. What caused the protests were these 3 still images in the middle of the film. One press report explained, parents of Madeleine McCann who went missing 3 years ago have released a new video and photo of their missing daughter to mark the 3rd anniversary of the girl's disappearance. But the McCanns up till now had not in the previous 3 years ever displayed these 3 controversial photos. If it was explicitly approved by the McCanns, it was certainly a very strange decision. The first one has been called the floorboards photo. This one has been called the ice lolly photo. It was the middle one, however, which caused the greatest adverse reaction. It's been called the makeup photo, for obvious reasons, featuring much blue eyeshadow, a pink hair bow, lipstick and jewellery. She does not look happy. Many call it the Lolita photo. Like the other 2 photos, it was clearly posed. The photographer must have been positioned well below her head, looking upwards at her. When the video was released and an intense debate began about the choice of these 3 photos, the McCanns publicly claimed that The photo shows her when she was 3 after a raid on her mummy's dressing box. Could she have put the necklace on herself? Could she have applied the pink bow to her hair? Could she have applied the blue eyeshadow neatly? Or lipstick? Overwhelmingly, observers agree that the evidence from the photograph suggests that an adult made her up. And of course, an adult was on hand to take the photo. The McCanns have not said who took this photograph. Even if Madeleine had raided the dressing box as claimed, it is one thing to take a photo like that for your family photo album, but it's an entirely different matter to release it for millions to see. The next day, many media noted that Madeleine looked much older than her actual 3 years due to the makeup and jewellery. The Independent newspaper said, "Can the McCanns be thinking straight?" To keep their story alive, they have just released a moody video complete with a musical soundtrack which includes a photograph of the 3-year-old wearing makeup and gazing into the camera. It is that image which, predictably, has featured in the media. It seems a bizarre and unsettling development. Clearly, someone should surely have pointed out to them that in a case over which paedophilia casts an obvious shadow, it looks downright weird when a photograph which has the effect of sexualizing the missing child becomes part of the campaign to find her. Even Mark Williams Thomas, despite his unstinting support for the McCanns, was so shocked at the images that he went on his Twitter account stating that it was so inappropriate and so damaging. Another prominent commentator wrote, "I know what a picture of a child playing looks like. My parents have albums of pictures of my sister as a child playing with makeup, dressing up. I also understand when I'm seeing the deliberate sexualization of a child. I also know which end of the spectrum that those images lie. I've previously criticised people for expressing these sorts of views, but when you see the 3 Madeleine pictures in that video in close succession, you start asking, what's the probability that this is just some sort of accidental pose? I really don't like the answer. I'm not a photographer nor a filmmaker, nor actively involved in the media, and so if I can pick up on these references, then John Corner most certainly can." Newspapers were flooded with similar comments. Here's a selection. And there were hundreds more comments like this, all in the same vein. When I looked through the range of comments about the makeup photo, I found 2, both of which I think are very perceptive. I'm looking at her hair. The fringe is kind of grown out and comes to beneath her eyes, just like the last photo, the one of Maddie by the pool with Jerry and Amelie. If you look at pictures of her a few weeks before in Donegal, her fringe isn't that long. If it was taken before the holiday, it must have been just before, in my opinion. The second comment, also very observant. Still, I don't understand the purpose of the photo with the blue eyeshadow. Anybody notice that on this said photo, the right side of the background seems to show the same wall as the wall in the new released video? So was the photo taken while on holiday? Is the photo meant to remember somebody who was there when the photo was taken? I have compared the likenesses of Madeleine on the makeup photo with her on the last photo, and I think the similarities are striking. Here are my observations. Madeleine's face appears to indicate that the pictures were taken around the same time. The length of her hair and fringe appears to be identical. In both photos, she is seen wearing a pink hair bow or band. This is unusual as I can only find 2 other photos of Madeleine out of many where she has a hairband. They may not be the same bow or band, but clearly on both occasions an adult had been arranging her hair. On both photos, Madeleine can be seen wearing a pink top. Now, in addition to these observations, I note that in the makeup photo, Madeleine is photographed against a pale yellow, ochre-coloured stucco background, of a type rarely seen in England, but very common in Mediterranean countries like Portugal. Moreover, to the right of Madeleine's head is a dark-coloured object which could be a lamp holder, which again looks similar to the layout of properties in the Ocean Club. Here is an example. The blue object looks as though it might be a blue plastic chair, as shown here. Now, in my previous film, When Madeleine Died, you'll recall that I presented persuasive evidence that the so-called last photo must have been taken on the Sunday, the second day of the holiday, mainly because of the weather conditions. I also showed that there was no convincing evidence of any photos of Madeleine being taken after that date. I suggest that the makeup photo was taken in Praia de Luz that very week. There is no evidence that any photos of Madeleine exist after Sunday the 29th of April. So I suggest that the makeup photo was taken on the same day. Madeleine, to most observers, looks unhappy in this photo. Madeleine was also dressed up for the last photo. She has a pink smock on and she had a pink hair bow or bead. In the makeup photo, she also has a pink top, maybe the same one. She still has a hair bead or bow, maybe different, but now additionally she has a necklace, eyeshadow and lipstick. It's a possibility then that the makeup photo was taken in the afternoon sometime after the last photo by the pool. And as I suggested in my last film, I think the time Madeleine died may have been within a few hours of that picture being taken. So is it possible then that the makeup photo is the true last photo of Madeleine?
The other thing which came up there, if I just skip that back a little, just a minute, in the update, you will that he gave on Wednesday, Thursday this week, we've got this thing that I put the mouse pointer on, which appears to be a wall thermometer that's been identified by a viewer as a possible wall thermometer. So that could be a way of identifying where that picture was taken, and that's still sort of something that's in progress, basically. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is the perception control grid. I think probably I'll be fairly accurate in saying that the abduction story has flown. You know, again, with the 10-year anniversary, they still push the abduction story. That perception has been put out into the British public. But I think really from what you've seen in this presentation and in Richard's films, you'll find more detail, is that perception has been generated by a grid of influence, and it appears to involve these areas. We've got the Crown and the UK government is one big area. We've got MI5, we've got the media, obviously that's a big one. MI6 were infiltrating Portuguese authorities. Clarence Mitchell was overseeing the McCann team, planting stories in the media. Rogue agencies, as in Metodo 3, and the Alpha investigations, generating bogus stories which were then fed into the media. And the media misleads the MPs, so they will sort of not do or do certain things, being influenced by the McCann case. And then we have the Murdoch octopus, again controlling the media and the public's perception. I think that's a pretty good sort of overview. Of course, there's Clarence Mitchell again. Now, to sort of fill out a few of these details, back in Portugal, 13th of November, at Salita, near Praia de Luz, Murat and the McCann associates, this included Murat's mother, Brian Kennedy, Edward Smethurst, there was a lawyer in each party. It was followed on the 17th of November 2007 when the McCanns, Mitchell and others met at Rothley Court Hotel, and news leaked out, and of course Mitchell claimed that this was a friendly meeting. So in other words, they'd met both in Portugal and back in the UK. They'd all met as a group, apparently to coordinate their story, because it was after this meeting in the 17th of November that it was when they changed, the witnesses changed their story. So we have circumstantial evidence that they, this was all planned. And let's just see, we've got this clip of Mitchell.
Good morning, everybody. I just flew in yesterday, so if I sound a little spaced out at times, I do apologise. To a certain extent, I have some of the media on our side already, but we still have to be creative. We still have to be intelligent about what we put out there and when we put out there. Why did we get the likes of David Beckham coming in to support us very early on? Why did we get certain newspapers, News of the World, exists. That's another story. I'll tell you about that separately. The younger the child, the bigger the story is. Photogenic child on holiday, the mystery of how come she could be taken from her bedroom on that night of May the 3rd. That mystery remains unsolved to this day. We, people who have been close to it, genuinely do not know what's happened. There is no evidence to suggest he has come to physical harm. There is no evidence to suggest he has there is no evidence to suggest he has there is no evidence to suggest he has come to physical harm. That they somehow were allegedly involved. They are not. I state that categorically from the outset. They've been examined by at least 4 different law enforcement agencies. There was no question of them involved beyond the fact that they took a decision to dine some distance from the apartment on the night with their friends constantly checking. They might, I should add, they could have had, if they'd been able to have a professional nanny service, which wasn't available at the time, it wouldn't have checked as frequently as they were checking with their friends. As Miranda said, I went out originally as a civil servant for the Cabinet Office, so I was there as a neutral to help them with, as part of the consular package of consular assistance that is given. If you lose your passport abroad, you can go to your consul, your embassy, and you can get assistance. We had Portuguese pride and cultural differences. Why do these crazy Brits want to put their children to bed at 7:30 at night? They should be out with us at the table having wine till midnight. That's just how it is. And of course we had the forum debate, the multiplier effect of the wonderful joys of the blogosphere. We all blog. I'm sure I'm looking at many, many bloggers here today. Absolutely fine. Blogging is, in fact, a fantastic innovation, but in the wrong hands, with people who have a set of preconceived notions and prejudices, it can be just as destructive as sitting in a mainstream newspaper. So we had to deal with that and the constant monitoring of that. There are still 2 or 3 anti-McCann forums in existence to this day. Who still rail against the situation. They are all wrong, I might add. But essentially I had to sit down with Kate and Jerry at different times and say, right, we've got to define our central theme here, we've got to define our core messages, our key messages. You need to stick to them in the interviews that we're doing. I will stick to them in the public communications that I'm performing. And essentially the focus was always trying to bring it back to finding Madeleine. John Corner, a godparent at Madeleine's in Liverpool, he was already pumping out high-definition video material of Madeleine from previous birthday parties and family events, even before the Portuguese authorities had confirmed that she was missing. There was so much material on Madeleine coming into the BBC central newsroom, into the hub that brings in all the social media, the user-generated content, as they like to call it, that the BBC actually had to tell the family to stop sending us this stuff. Who is this girl? We don't even know her. And it was only later that morning that finally, grudgingly, confirmation came out from Portugal that yes, police were looking at this and that a British child had gone missing. We had to maintain the momentum throughout all this. As I say, we had to keep bringing it back to the search. It was always about this witness appeal, this sighting, this piece of information, not... We established a website for Madeleine very quickly. That's still there, still running to this day. It acted as a portal for information tip-offs, sightings. And journalists who were coming to it cold would have just done a quick Google search, read whatever it was in either indigenous media or international, and that was the truth in their eyes. It just isn't the case. So we had to keep constantly putting things in context and explaining it. Evening Standard in London, police named McCann as top suspects. What's a top suspect? A middle suspect? A bottom suspect? Again, it's hype, it's hyperbole, and all it was that they were given this arguido status, which in reality meant that they, if they wanted to, could have a lawyer present with the interviews that were being done. Kate, at one point, was advised, having done 4 interviews where all the questions were answered, she was advised finally on the 5th time with this status not to answer anymore because you've answered it several times already and you don't need to incriminate yourself, because it was clear that certain officers were beginning to go down that route without any evidence. So to this day, it's held against her online. Why didn't she answer all these questions in that interview? They never realised that she'd already answered them 4 times in previous interviews without a lawyer present. We had to occasionally threaten legal sanction with some of the denials, because some of the allegations were so lurid and so wild that if we didn't, it would have entered the narrative to the extent that we wouldn't have been able to claw it back. My role requires tact, diplomacy, and absolute common sense, and being utterly straight with the media. If you're straight with the media, generally they will be straight with you. Various ITV strands, BBC strands, and Hello campaign in Britain we did for the 1st anniversary. We did Oprah Winfrey in Chicago. The Americans very concerned about the story, even though they accept she probably isn't in America. But nevertheless, there's still American traffic there. We have an ongoing relationship with Crime Watch, which is the major criminal investigative program, which works very closely with the Met in Britain. And if the Met want to do something for Operation Grange, they'll use Crime Watch as their vehicle of choice, and Kate and Jerry are very happy to do interviews for that. They tend not to want to do wider interviews these days because they've done so many. And we have monitoring continuously online of the various flora and fauna online, some of which is none too pleasant. And we have a team of online supporters who help us with the monitoring as well, a number of women who are very concerned about Madeleine in America. We had a trip to meet the Pope, the then Pope, Pope Benedict, just in the first few months, very soon after she went missing, partly because I was told privately that the Holy Father himself was watching it on television. And we were able to organise an audience with the Pope, which meant a great deal to them. We have legal action continuing against a particular former Portuguese police officer, Mr. Amaral, who wrote a very unpleasant book. Alleging, in essence, that Kate and Jerry know what happened. They've covered up the truth since then. It's just not true. It's fundamentally untrue. And therefore, ergo defamatory. Going through the Portuguese courts at the moment, it's a very slow process, but that is still ongoing. And again, there is a certain amount of attendant media around that needs to be controlled and managed.
It's long on YouTube. And then we've got this other video that Richard chose, a very brief clip. I don't know if this is going to play. Bill Mahoney. Bill Mahoney talks about them using paedophiles to control politicians.
The intelligence agencies are the ones who are ultimately controlling some of these care homes and institutions.
Absolutely.
Because they have the power to A, prevent the police from doing a proper investigation, and B, make sure that things don't get into the media.
Well,
okay? and he suggests, and others have suggested, that they're used as blackmail traps for powerful people.
That's what I was just going to say.
Or money,
yeah.
or just snuff films and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So let's assume then that it does go right to the power at the top.
Paedophilia can control world politics.
Exactly.
World politics. Now, let me give you an example, right? If you look at Haute de la Garenne, right? Mm-hmm. Jimmy Savile. Now, Haute de la Garenne, what they do. But first of all, I've got to tell you that Jimmy Savile was often present at cabinet meetings in Israel. He was asked to go out there and sit in on cabinet meetings, mm-hmm. Jimmy Savile. Mm-hmm. God knows why. But
I'm just trying to get to because it's the crux. Do you know what I mean?
You're a politician. You're a politician, right?
Yeah, I understand.
I'm Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
I'll say, Rich, you want a kid?
Yeah.
Come over to Jersey. It's a pucker place. We've got some beautiful kids. You can do what you want.
Yeah.
come up, it's going to cost you this, or it's going to cost you that, it's going to cost you a little favour. You go, all right, Jim, that's great. Yeah. You go over there, but you don't know when you're having sex with a child, or you're abusing a child, or you're torturing a child, or you're killing a child, whether you've got a baby there and you want to bite it to death. Yeah. Then
it's filmed without
it's filmed. You get home, DVD, or then would have been a VHS copy, comes in the post, so you see it, you're the politician, and then we say to you, we've got this on you, look at this film, then you'll come back and say, what do you want?
So in essence then, it's something which is, these grotesque acts that people do, that's something which is kind of somehow, for whatever reason, ingrained in certain people, and the intelligence agencies, because the CIA have been involved in this kind of activity, actually training 9-year-old girls in how to pleasure men, and I think that's been admitted to, right? So they're using something which is there as a power tool, effectively.
Yeah. Now, I would say all the intelligence agencies, all the secret services around the world, every single country, the best thing that you can have, really, is if you call someone a paedophile, and you can prove that they're a paedophile and they're a politician or whatever, you have then got them by the short and curlies, and they will do whatever you want.
And then the even more provocative one is Ken Livingstone. He said on a radio interview that MI5 boys were being, in fact you can see it from the text, boys were being abused and MI5 was filming it.
I was raising in Parliament up against Mrs Thatcher the Kincora Boys Home, where boys were being abused, and MI5 was filming it because they were hoping to be able to blackmail senior politicians in Northern Ireland.
Okay. So, Richard has done all these films. First one was released on the 19th of December 2014, and after a while it had 250,000 views. That's a fairly significant number. So Richard wrote to the Belfast Telegraph, Daily Express, Daily Mail, all those listed there in the right-hand column, and he sent them this message. I am the producer of a new film about the Madeleine McCann case. The film is the most comprehensive investigative documentary ever produced on the case and is over 4 hours long. You can watch all 4 parts here, and he sent them the link. The film has now been watched by over 250,000 people, and slowly the British public are learning the truth about the Madeleine McCann case. The facts of the case are quite straightforward and are covered in detail, but these facts seem to have been obscured by the many baseless stories that have been put out over the last 7 years in the media. I will be happy to be interviewed by your newspaper about this new documentary. The film is fully independent and has not been subject to interference by certain government agencies, hence it is closer to the truth than anything produced before now. If you go online and read the thousands of viewers' comments about the film, you will see that this has been very well received. I am currently working on another film about the McCanns which will uncover more information which has not been featured in the media. I can give you information about that should you be interested. I am willing to meet with your newspaper to be interviewed about why I made these films and tell you more about them. That's the message he sent. Nothing came back. No response at all. 16th of March 2015, Jenny Kleeman wrote to Richard. I'm a freelance journalist. I'm making a film for the Guardian's website about the growing number of people who believe the mainstream media isn't asking the right questions about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Time and again I've been referred to your documentaries on the subject, which I found intriguing. I read with interest that you have a new documentary coming out, as well as a forthcoming speaking tour. I'd value the opportunity to interview you as you see in action at one of your talks late in March or early April. Is there a telephone number I could reach you on to discuss this, or an email address? So, what happened was, I'll tell you what happened on that, because I was sort of a witness to this. I was at Richard Hall's talk in Nottingham in April 2015, so over 2 years ago now, and there was a guy inside with a mobile phone. He says, "Oh, my daughter's outside, and she's just seen this woman turned up with a camera, and it's Jenny Kleeman." Jenny Kleeman actually came to Richard Hall's event, and she was waiting outside for people and filming them and getting a reaction from them. She didn't speak to Richard, and Richard didn't speak to her. He just, he packed up, and she was down. It was pouring with rain as well. I know, because I was there. So what was she after? What was she after? Why was she filming people at Richard's event? Was she hoping to get somebody shouting at them for, saying that the mainstream media were covering up, and then put that out in her film. We don't know, this film's never come out. International Business Times produced an article on 27th of April. They're a fairly big website, not as big as some of the mainstream like BBC and whatnot. An article by Josh Robbins said that in the Madeleine McCann case, where there is a huge establishment lie, in my opinion, being told about it, the public really aren't buying it now, and there has been a bit of a sea change in that issue, he said. That they're reporting what Richard says. In the article, he was reported as a conspiracy theorist. That's what the article reported him as. That is an article with an agenda. Richard isn't a conspiracy theorist, he's an investigator. Richard D. Hall is a chartered engineer turned investigative journalist, reporter and film producer and cameraman and director. Now, that's what he is. It's a bit like saying that Josh Robbins is a conspiracy theorist because he reports certain stories in the press. So, Richard has also gone through that. He went through that in a more recent broadcast about how he'd responded to that Josh Robbins guy. He went through the emails, and you can see that. And I think he did that about a month ago or 2 months ago. You can see that in his YouTube programs. So these are all the elements of the cover-up. And he goes, one of the things we haven't covered is like TV drama. He gives an example of this about a child abduction case that was made into a TV drama. You know, it's not meant to be Madeleine McCann, but you could see, you know, it's not difficult to see that it's sort of based on the McCann thing. So true crime, that, you know, they've not really done, like Crime Watch. That was all a set-up. TV News has covered everything up. Newspapers have covered stuff up. Celebrities have got in on the case. None of them have told the truth about what, for example, the Gaspers have said. There have been fake police investigations, politicians have got involved, chat shows it's been on. All of those things, none of this information, or almost none of it, that I've shown you today from Richard's films has come out. So overall theoretical conclusions, if we can put it that way. Madeleine died on 29th of April 2007. The cause and exact circumstances of death are not known, but probably involve sedatives. The body was held for a period of time. The abduction story was a hoax, planned and participated in by the McCanns. In other words, from the 29th of April, or the 30th of April, to the 3rd of May, they used those 4 days to plan the abduction hoax with the help of Robert Murat and almost certainly members of the Tapas 7. Whatever happened would have affected senior people in the government, media or intelligence services, or all of these groups, if the truth had become more widely known. A sophisticated, powerful and widespread network exists which works across countries to control information, perception and secrets. It can control police forces and media networks and initiate punitive measures to protect itself. And so, in closing, I would like to acknowledge, as Richard does, the work of people like Joanna Murray, maintained a website that updating British people on developments in the case. Translators that have made it their business to translate the McCann files and the Portuguese files into English. A lot of this has come from that. They weren't paid for their work, they did it voluntarily. So there's a McCann files website, there's a McCann PJ files website, Jill Havens forum, the Complete Mystery of Madeleine McCann forum, that's got a lot of information there. And Richard thanks, and I obviously thank by proxy, Lizzie Taylor, Peter Mack, Tony Bennett, Peter Hyatt, Jill Haven, Dr. Martin Roberts, Nigel Moore and Steve Marsden. And there are many other people that have contributed to this investigation as well. So that's all the information. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you found it a worthwhile use of your time.